What if your healing wasn't just about you feeling better, but about revealing God's glory through you? Is transformation and healing enough? Where does it end? What do you do with it? You see, when I was a child, I used to love a good story because stories have a way of carrying truth straight into our hearts. They paint pictures in our minds and make messages unforgettable. Today, I want to share with you what I call the power of your story. And we're going to dive right into John chapter 9. There was a man who was born blind. And because at that time, being blind meant you couldn't do much for yourself, he resulted into begging. So he was known as the blind beggar. Being blind and being a beggar was a part of his identity right from when he was a child. He was born that way. And here comes Jesus and his disciples walking. And Jesus' disciples start to ask questions. They ask him, "What happened, Rabbi? What happened to this man? Was it his sin? Was it his parents' sin?" They were trying to find out what happened. But here's what Jesus said, which is in verse 3. And I want you to pay attention to something. He said, "It was not because of his sin or his parents' sin." Jesus answered, "This happened so the power of God could be seen in him." This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. And then Jesus goes ahead, spits on the ground, makes mud with saliva, and spreads it all over the man's eyes. And he says, "Go, wash yourself at the pool of Siloam." Now, the Bible also makes us understand, this is the NLT version, it makes us understand that the meaning of Siloam is sent. So Jesus does this dramatic thing and spreads mud over his eyes and asks him to go wash himself at the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed himself and came back seeing. His neighbors and everyone who knew him as a blind beggar, everyone who knew his identity as a blind beggar, started to ask questions. Isn't this the man who sits and begs? And some people said, "Oh yeah, he's the one." And some people were like, "No, he just looks like him." But the beggar was saying, "No, guys, I am the one. I am the same one." Now they started to ask him questions. They started to probe. If we have known you all your life as a blind beggar, someone who sits on the street begging for money. Who healed you? How come you were able to see? How come your life has been transformed? What happened? And he told them, "The man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself.'" He said, "The man they called Jesus." Now they asked him more questions. They probed further. "Where is he now?" They asked. "I don't know." That was the man's reply. He didn't know where his transformation came from. He didn't know the man. He just knew that his name was called Jesus. The reason why this is highlighted is because there was also a blind beggar somewhere in Luke chapter 18. Now, this particular man in Luke chapter 18, verse 38, here's what he said. As they told him Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, he called out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." He referred to Jesus not as Jesus of Nazareth, but he referred to Jesus as the Son of David. That means he had an understanding. He knew who Jesus was. Now, here we are in John chapter 9 with this man who was also a blind beggar. And they asked him, "Who healed you?" And he said, "The man they call Jesus." You see the difference now? And they asked him, "Where is he?" And he said, "I don't know." Friends, more than anything else, before you start sharing your story of transformation, be sure that you know the one who did the work. This is the key to maintaining that transformation. It is very important for you to know who did the work, because people are going to come to you. People are going to come and ask you, "What happened to you? What changed about you? How come you're so confident now? How come you have goals? How come you're creating goals and visions for your life? How come your life has changed? And when they come, you must direct them to the source of your healing. You must point them back to the one who changed you, the one who transformed you. You must know who he is. There is no way you'll be able to point them back to him if you do not know who he is. He is part of your story. That's your God story. You must know who he is. Otherwise, you would attribute your success or your results to something or someone else other than God. You must know where he is so that you can easily point the people to him and say, it's not me, it is Jesus. You go follow him and experience the same transformation. Your story is not just about overcoming low self esteem through God's word, but about overcoming it and stepping into the fullness of God's plan for your life. That is the purpose, so that you can also start sharing your story. You have a unique story that you need to share with the world and the people around you that would bring them and point them to Jesus, the one who transformed you. You could hear the uncertainty in the man's response when he said, I don't know. He was he was healed, he was transformed, but he didn't know the person who did it. But something happened later on. This is where the Pharisees started to, because the people took him to the Pharisees and told them his story. And the Pharisees started to ask him questions as well. What did he do? How did he heal you? Of course, we know that they were just looking for ways to accuse Jesus of something, one thing or the other. Yeah, they were all jealous of the fact that Jesus was able to do such miracles. And we all know the stories of the Pharisees and how they wanted to stick to religion. But that's not the area of focus today. The area of focus is this man, the story that this man was telling the people about his transformation. I would say he redeemed himself somewhere in 30, verse 30. So verse 28, they cursed him and said, you are his disciple. They cursed the blind man and said he was a disciple of Jesus. But we are disciples of Moses. They wanted to demean the work that God had done in this man's life because he was coming through Jesus, and they believed that Jesus was a sinner and all of that. But the man said, why? That's very strange. This was the man's response. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from. He healed my eyes, and you don't know where he comes from. This was the man telling them now. He was like, wow, this person that you are speaking so negatively about, talking about you don't know where he came from, talking about him being a sinner, he healed my eyes. This was now showing the man's certainty. He now knew that, you know what, there's no way that this man could have done this thing on his own. He's definitely from God. He said, he healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners. If you say he's a sinner, God doesn't listen to sinners. But he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done it. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done it. And then, of course, they went on to accuse him some more and, try to shut him up. But this is where the man redeemed himself. He told his story to the people. He went on to explain that there's no way that this person couldn't have been from God, even though he wasn't certain, but there was something in him that was telling him that it's not possible that this thing could have happened on its own. He was from God. And so that is the lesson for today, my friend. It is important for us to know the source of our transformation and the source of our healing even before we start to share our story, so that we can point the people back to God. We can point the people back to Jesus. He is the source of our transformation. And I hope that this message was a blessing to you today. And I wish you and your family, you and your loved ones, prosperous new year. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye for now.